Recording is in progress.
Okay, hello everybody. It is week 90 of our Indigenous Global Unity Summit. So I do start today by acknowledging those who came before us on this land. We begin today by acknowledging that we walk upon the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples. We recognize their history, spirituality, culture, and stewardship of the land. We're grateful to all Indigenous groups for their commitment to protect the land and its resources. We're committed to reconciliation, partnership, and enhanced understanding. We acknowledge the land we're meeting on here in the Greater Toronto Area is the traditional territory of many nations, and the lands known as in Kalenkeha as Tikaranto, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Wendat, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe or Anishinaabeg peoples, and is now home to many diverse peoples. We'd like to acknowledge the land we're on here is at the meeting place of two treaties, the lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit and those of the First Nations of the Williams Treaty. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 and is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. We also acknowledge the Two-Row Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Six Nations of the Tikaranto watershed and the settlers, an agreement that bound them to work together, but to develop their societies in parallel on these shared lands. In our role as settlers and displaced people on this land, we share the responsibility of challenging and disrupting colonial systems that enact violence upon the land and stand in solidarity with Indigenous peoples. We'd like to thank the Indigenous peoples of these lands, including First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, for sharing this land with us. We also acknowledge and recognize all of the world's Indigenous peoples as stewards of Mother Earth. I do like also to say Sawubona, which means I see you, I see myself in you, I see your hopes, your dreams, and your struggles. I see your ancestors as well, because interconnectedness does not end with the two people who are greeting each other. It extends to include the ancestors, because all beings in Mother Nature are interconnected, and there is no sense of being separate. I see myself in all beings, and therefore, if I harm other beings or Mother Nature, it translates into harming myself. So today is Thursday, February 23rd, 2023, week 90 of our IGU Summit series, and the 8th of our IGU Summit events for 2023. The guest speaker for today is myself, Lloyd Helferty from Drawdown Markham and UnityNet International. I'm located in the German Mills Creek watershed or subwatershed of the Don River watershed of the Great Lakes Basin in the Greater Tikaranto bioregion, GTA, Greater Toronto area of Ontario, Canada, here in North America, Turtle Island. I am the co-founder and concept coordinator for the Global Unity Network, or UnityNet, which is being established globally by UnityNet International as a humanitarian enterprise and hybrid holistic practicum learning system management company that's based here in the Greater Toronto area. So the presentation title for today, going into details of UnityNet structure. This will be an overview of the INAP collaboratives, how they are structured, giving an example of why they are a foundation of the UnityNet network of networks. This will be followed by discussions about the UnityNet 2023 Living Week calendar, starting to plan from April. Earth Day, we already have one event published on Eventbrite. We have another 5th event in May on World Biodiversity Day, May 22nd. This is a new event in our calendar because of the importance of biodiversity and the new Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which I will go into more details later. Also in June, we have World Environment Day on June 5th. In August, the internationally coordinated Bubble Fun Festivals during Indigenous Unity Weeks from August 9th to 19th, from the International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples to World Humanitarian Day. And then finally in October, Youth Peace Weeks from Global Cooperation Day, the 4th to World Food Day, which is the 16th. I am doing this presentation today myself because our original guest speaker, Paul Ole Letura, who was scheduled to be doing this today. He's the founder and CEO of Mulika Africa. He sent me a message yesterday, said, "Good morning, Lloyd. Apology, I want to reschedule my presentation as now I'm on the bus going to the village. I won't be or won't have access to the internet because of the geographical area." So I am putting in the chat information about our friend Paul Lectura and his organization, Mulika Africa. So hopefully we'll have him on in subsequent week. I'd like to start again with an introduction of who I am, who we are, and what we do. So my name is Lloyd Halferty, co-founder of UnityNet International, which is known as Uni, a hybrid holistic practicum learning system management company based in Canada. We assist with community partnership building globally, but in the local context by leveraging a unique set of community engagement activities developed in partnership with the members of the AHIABGA. I'm also the Chief Ecosystem Director, Program Development Director, and a Sustainable Society Consultant for AHIABGA University, headquartered in Manhattan, in New York. I'm located in the city of Markham in the Don River watershed, as I mentioned, German Mills Creek, draining into Lake Ontario, the lowest and last of the North American Great Lakes, in the Great Lakes Basin of this greater Tkaronto bioregion in southern Ontario, Canada, North America, or so known as Turtle Island. So AHIABGA University, a private 501(c)(3) nonprofit company, UN Global Compact member, UN Academic Impact member and partner, a virtual university created to help empower global populations reestablish a sustainable balance with their local environments. We do this by designing and implementing projects that support a strong and diversified local economy, integrating core sustainable technologies and infrastructure into these communities in the areas of renewable energy, high-density food growth solutions, and systems for sustainably managing waste and water. So we are supported by over 375 companies, and we also support local education and training in the construction, deployment, and maintenance of all this integrated solutions for achieving closed-loop systems that in turn support self-sufficient, sustainable communities. So I'm not going to go into the details today of how we are working. However, I will put into the chat some information both about myself and some of the important things that are happening here in Canada as Canada attempts to advance the 2030 agenda at home and abroad. And as well, a definition defining the methodology of the AHIABGA University training system. I'm also putting in the chat some information about the Science for Peace Climate Smart Food Program and our network there, along with some additional information about climate smart food, which can be found online at various social media sites that we have developed. So I do want to mention, of course, the Living Re calendar. I talk about events coming up, showing this calendar each time we have our events. This is something I have been creating since January, and it reflects the Drawdown Markham and UnityNet GTA plans for 2023. Which now revolve around 5 key community engagement events in April, May, June, August, and October. So the 5 events include the UNDRIP Day on Earth Day, Saturday, April 22nd, and then that's followed now by World Biodiversity Day, Sunday, May 22nd. This is a new event. You can see it on the calendar in the middle in bright green. Following that is our Abraham Project Tree Planting Day and the International Youth Day on Saturday, August 12th. And then that's followed by Youth Peace Weeks in October, which is starting on Wednesday, October 4th. This is the date of our Ubuntu Summit, the event that also launches not just the Youth Peace Weeks, but also our Global Climate Smart Youth Forum, which is the primary hybrid learning week program that takes place until Monday, October 16th, which is World Food Day. You'll also notice that I've added Somos Avalon Maya, a spiritual event that takes place with the Maya in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, every Sunday at 11:11 a.m. Eastern Time. These events are shown in pink on the calendar. So Mitch Gold, who has told me about these events earlier this month, said we are looking at how to connect the two energies of the eagle and the condor. So one last thing that I wanted to mention is that Tuesday, January 17th, you'll see on our calendar from last month, we also had our first Drawdown Markham virtual event for 2023, where we discussed establishing our PodNet GTA Enterprise Network, which is intended to also support the 25 INAB collaboratives that we intend to create here in the Greater Toronto area. In the last few weeks, I mentioned Markham and Greater Toronto will be doing everything we can through our INAB collaboratives, including demonstrating the regenerative gardens and the forests and the farms and the buildings and the kitchens, and also the regenerative finance. We'll also be empowering our humanitarian entrepreneurs who are localizing the global goals in our own local communities, so we can join all the world in helping to localize these SDGs. So this is the essence of the Global Unity Network, what we call our network of networks, consisting of these local and localized multi-stakeholder partnerships, the interfaith neighborhood, academic, and business collaboratives who are changing the paradigm of development globally, one community at a time. So I also mentioned for the past few weeks that there are other things to consider, like the FAO newsletter said, the 2023 is the International Year of Millets. This is something to consider. COP15 was also mentioned in their newsletter, especially around the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. So this is important because this also established a set of global biodiversity goals. So these are brand new, just from this December. So from that big biodiversity meeting in Montreal, these new set of goals should be what we are truly supporting, and not only the global goals or SDGs. So these global biodiversity goals need to be translated into national goals in each country, considering each country's circumstances and priorities. So I'll also be putting some details into the chat. Also important is the 2023 SDG Summit, the high-level political forum on sustainable development under the auspices of the General Assembly, which will be convened on the 19th and 20th of December 2023 during the UN General Assembly High-Level Week, where the heads of states of governments will gather at the UN in New York to follow up and review the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the 17 SDGs. So this is also being added to the calendar. I'm hopeful that we'll have some presence at that event somehow, possibly in collaboration with our partners in Manhattan, such as Energon University and We the World, Bill and Rick. So the event information you can find in the chat about the 2023 SDG Summit, as well as different information about, for instance, the International Plant Protection Convention, and more recently, the Secretary of International Plant Protection meeting with officials from Ottawa and Washington, D.C. There's also some additional information about the FAO Statistical Yearbook of Agriculture, assessment of agricultural plastics. And then, of course, as I mentioned, there is this Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which again has its own set of goals that are, in some cases, in alignment with those sustainable development goals. But of course, we have a new set of goals us to try to achieve in terms of biodiversity. So we have our own biodiversity network, the UnityNet Unity Biodiversity Network. There's a discussion group, a Facebook group, a professional network, as well as, of course, the foundation of much of our network, this Regenerative Living, Learning, and Lifestyle Network, which again in the chat. So as we move forward with our legacy projects here in Markham, we have already begun having a local conversation with the 7th Generation Initiative via Brian Popa in the 7th Generation GTB team. We hope that we can meet with the founders Susan V. Bozak in the near future as well. And as I noted before, we hope soon also to have a conversation with the founders and leaders of the Maple Leaf Center for Action on Food Security. So again, in the chat, you'll find links to the 7th Generation Initiative, as well as its founder, Susan P. Bozak, as well as this Maple Leaf Center for Action on Food Security as well, which are important in our own local context. So again, today, Thursday, February 23rd, 2023, not a special day in the UN calendar. However, these days, obviously not recognized in the UN calendar, but they are fun events to consider in our own lives. Today is National Banana Bread Day. So National Banana Bread Day actually is intended to celebrate a perfect pairing of fruit plus bread. Just another fun event that we have. Again, the link in the chat goes into more detail of what is National Banana Bread Day, including a little bit about the context of how banana bread came about because of hard times back in 1929, where people were struggling, again, to keep food on the table. So as the bananas turned brown and then turned black, people didn't want to throw out the bananas, so they were putting them into their bread. And that was the beginning of the banana bread craze, which continues, of course, to this day. So again, we are also having a discussion with people like Sir Bailey at youthbuildcharter.org, Michael Redler from the C4 group, our Climate Smart Community Construction Collaborative. We do also hope to have additional conversations with people like Lynn Crandall and Marcella Olivia and Isaac Sabakije, and talk about the next Earth Fest, which is also being planned. We hope to also co-host a hybrid event with our UnityNet GTA and PodNet partners and all of the Wikipod collaborators. We hope to have this event also to help spark the imagination of young people and teachers and their parents and elders who are working with the local learners at our schools here in Markham, in York Region, and the Greater Toronto Area. And we want to empower them to take action through the Global Sister Schools program, starting with the planting of these youth peace gardens, where we also hope to work in close collaboration with all the members of UnityNet Ontario and UnityNet Canada, including the co-founder of the Indigenous Global Unity Network, Michael Schur, who we'd like to begin having a conversation about this concept of practical reconciliation, starting with the development of a curriculum related to his Indigenous Unity flag. Specifically, we do want to establish a legacy education project to do in solidarity with Indigenous peoples, possibly also with Scouts Canada and Europe, and hopefully with some more partners like Rotary International, as well as seeking to implement the Indigenous Unity Badge for young people who are participating in their Scouts programs. So we also want to partner with local schools, especially schools of the arts and schools of architecture in each of our own local communities across the network of networks, where we can host a series of virtual and in-person charrettes and help Michael and the Scouts come up with the curriculum, hopefully over the next few months, where the curriculum would help young people understand that every country has their own Indigenous peoples, that we must become compassionate members of a global society of humans as an essential part of a process of real reconciliation. So the key people we have for these projects are the members of the Unity Learning Network and the Global Sister Schools program, as well as others in our network that wish to contribute to this process and the efforts. I want to talk as well about UNDRIP Day 2023. So this is the event where we'll do the drumming at city halls with Indigenous peoples. It's also the day we engage with the students at local schools to start planning and building their own local youth peace gardens at their own local schools and in their own communities with the various community partners that we wish to also engage to establish the INAB collaboratives. So again, you'll find additional information in the chat, including for Earth Day as well. So I don't have a logo yet for the UnityNet World Biodiversity Day 2023. So this is the day, again, I mentioned we plan our Youth Peace Garden ceremony as in-person events. And so on this day, which is 2 weeks ahead of the Abraham Project World Environment Day on June 5th, we'll bring together all of the local students and their parents and families, get them participating in planning their Youth Peace Garden ceremony event. So we'll go over things like logistics and who to invite, drafting an invitation letter, issuing a press release. So this will be likely an outdoor event in one of our local public parks with the local council member, others in the community like Rotary Markham. Here in the city, Markham will likely do it in Leechcroft Park, which is an 8-acre park with shelters and a splash pad, where we may also be able to come back and do our Bubble Fun Festival event in August. So we'll use this event to promote the rest of our Drawdown Markham events, including the IGU summits and the networks, get young people, schools, and teachers and parents and grandparents from Markham and York Region and Greater Toronto engaged in the conversations we're having within UnityNet, engage the schools and the teachers and their families in a competition and related learning program to design their own Bubble Fun machines. So our goal is to have a few working Bubble Fun machines by August, created by some entrepreneurial students from some of the local high schools. We'll also create an Eventbrite page for this World Biodiversity Day with the invitation. We'll read something like how to design and build a productive food garden that maximizes nutrition and maximizes the potential to protect and restore biodiversity within your own bioregion and watershed. So again, you will find some additional information, for instance, about the South Markham Community Food Security Network, as well as Drawdown Markham and the related Markham Smart Gardens Network as well, that we have been working to put together with our partners. And so the Abraham Project Tree of Peace and Reconciliation tree planting event is the next one on June 5th. Takes place on World Environment Day. This is the day we plant the trees of peace and reconciliation and raise the Indigenous unity flags, potentially in some countries, in celebration of the ceremony of the youth peace gardens that the young people in our local communities established with their schools and their families and the rest of the community members. So it's on this day where we create the INAB collaboratives, our local empowerment networks for the humanitarian entrepreneurs in our local communities, where these INAB collaborative cooperative entities form the backbone of our network of networks that we, again, call UnityNet. And so in the chat, you'll find that information about World Environment Day. And then we have our internationally coordinated Bubble Fun festivals on International Youth Day. It's the date for Bubble Fun to keep the date open for the Youth Peace Gardens. We'll come back to them to celebrate our diversity as localized communities of equals in our own communities, but coordinated globally. So we celebrate together in a hybrid event that is local and global. So virtual sharing in each one of our local communities where we recognize those around the world who are also localizing the local goals through the development of these partnerships in our local communities, where each of us helps to ensure that our own local humanitarian entrepreneurs are empowered by the members of our INAB collaboratives. So again, in the chat, you'll find some links again to various related networks, such as information as well about International Youth Day, August 12th, which is the day we're hoping to do that event. And so the final big event is the Youth Peace Weeks, from Global Cooperation Day, October 4th, to World Food Day, October 16th. And it is during the Youth Peace Weeks where we'll do some edutainment programs with both in-person events here in the city of Markham in the region of York and from across Ontario and Canada, but especially from the Rouge and Don watersheds of the Great Lakes Basin of Turtle Island, in partnership with the members of our local communities, including the schools and the Indigenous people here in the Greater Toronto area. We'll work with schools like York University and Seneca College and the local schools and teachers from the Catholic and secular school boards we will seek to work with our UnityNet members through Drawdown Markham and our partnerships, especially as we create our own local INAB collaborative here in the GTA, where we do seek to create at least 5, but as many as 25 of these local empowerment networks, established this year, over the next few years, with at least 3 by the end of 2023, if we can, in Markham, Vaughan, and Richmond Hill. So the INAB Collaborative Cooperative Empowerment Networks for our young people and humanitarian entrepreneurs are localizing the global goals here in Markham, Greater Toronto, Canada, in the Great Lakes Basin north of Lake Ontario, Turtle Island. So join us through this Drawdown Markham, UnityNet GTA, Ontario, and Canada groups. If you're living in another part of the country or in another country, even on another continent like Africa or in Asia, join our UnityNet CTP program so we can coordinate our activities, partner with your own local community through each of our own local INAB collaborative teams. So again, you'll find some information about Global Cooperation Day, October 4th, in the chat, as well as some additional information about World Food Day, which is October 4th and 16th, respectively. So I do want to mention as well, Sunlight Spectacle Hybrid Edutainment event. So this October 14th, during the annular eclipse that will be visible from the US, starting in Oregon, ending up in Texas, then going through Mexico, Central America, down into South America, ending up in Brazil. So the final event that I am hopeful that we'll be able to do this year as well is this Sunlight Spectacle 2023, following the solar eclipse taking place October 14th. Again, starting around Dune City, Oregon, will be visible from northeast corner of California to Rio Grande do Norte, Brazil. During the event, we want to do edutainment events, sending messages of unity, peace, hope, self-reliance, sovereignty, sustainability, forgiveness, and regeneration of our planet and society. So the messages we send out during these events are not only about jobs in the economy, because the education and training that is delivered during the events and through the Unity learning infrastructure is intended to uplift people with dignity, where the process and results of the learning is all about what we call practical reconciliation. So again, you'll find in the chat Sunlight Spectacle 2023 and the specifics of the event as it crosses over from the US over the Gulf of Mexico into Mexico and then finally into South America. And so I do want to mention as well the 5 Points Youth Foundation. I was designated as a Goodwill Ambassador for the 5 Points Youth Foundation, which is based in Los Angeles. I do have a portfolio covering Canada, La Francophonie, the Commonwealth of Nations, and Turtle Island communities. So as a member of the International Ad Hoc Advisory Board of Goodwill Ambassadors, we're seeking to empower our communities to engage with royal, Indigenous, and tribal leadership, as well as helping local communities to establish those interfaith, neighborhood, academic, and business collaboratives that will come together and pledge to support all of the local humanitarian entrepreneurs who are globalizing the global goals, starting with those SDGs, while we seek ways to leave no one behind. Again, you can connect to the Ad Hoc International Advisory Board of Goodwill Ambassadors at the link in the chat or on the screen. Also, I want to mention our primary partner and sponsor. I'd like to give recognition to, in particular, Andrew Networks, our door opening network of the Global Unity Network of Networks, or UnityNet, who is hosting this weekly Thursday Zoom call, which we're committed to take place again through December 2023. So Andrew Networks also hosting additional events like the Youth Peace Week events and our Drawdown Markham monthly events as well. So Andrew's promotional support services also rebroadcast any production-ready presentations or other citizen media with the theme of globalization, re-indigenization, resilience, local implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals done through the AHIABGA.org domain, redirected to a number of social media sites like UCIT-TV site and a number of others. Andrew Networks is a brand and domain name owned by ParXTC Export Trading Company, comprising the various social media channels, including TRN-TV, Universal Citizens Media Networks, Conversations with Andrew Williams Jr., and a number of other ones. So Andrew Networks is not only our primary sponsor supporting the promotional ecosystem for this UnityNet initiative, this Global Unity or Indigenous Global Unity Summit, which again continues until December. He is also our Yes, Yes, Yes partner. He's helping to open doors so that members of our network are able to discover their inner selves and passions. So Andrew Networks is working with the people who occupy the various nodes of our global Unity network so they can come together with the people of the network, acting like a net to support the dreams of these members so they can leverage their own passions, transform their visions of a better future for themselves and their own communities into reality that makes sense to themselves and their community members, however they might define what that better future is collectively as they seek to work together in partnership and leave no one behind. So again, in the chat, you will find additional information so that you can contact Andrew and connect to Andrew Networks as well. I do at this point now want to get into the INAB collaboratives, which are established at the local level, where we're leveraging our process of community engagement, which includes the Trees of Peace and Reconciliation tree planting ceremonies, and potentially in some cases the flag raising ceremonies for some communities. This would be followed by the community engagement and interaction through the regularly scheduled events, including the coordinated Bubble Fun festivals and sports and dancing and arts, done in collaboration with the local INAB collaborative members. So the CTP program done for twinning community activities such as community organized tree planting and the local regenerative community infrastructure development projects and events. So the Tea Diplomacy Initiative are in-person as well as virtual community conversations on topics like peace, regeneration, reconciliation, and forgiveness. The Dream Boards Initiative as well, done in collaboration with the C4 group members and others, along with identification and engagement of local talent, artists and creative people in the Orange economy for the purpose of promoting and showcasing their own talent, especially as they promote through their art the globalization of the global goals and the achievement of a what we call productive, compassionate, collaborative, regenerative economy that leaves no one behind, especially during any one of our Sunlight Spectacle or other edutainment events that may be done throughout the year. So we also have programs and activities that could be developed in the context of our climate smart gardens and forests delivered by FBSC in Oshawa, the climate smart kitchens delivered by Kindred Kitchens in Toronto, the Wheel of Life Farms delivered by an organization called EPWT in Vietnam, the CSAF centers, also known as Spark Learning Centers, or the Climate Smart Learning Centers, which essentially are at this point delivered by an organization called PodNet, which we are, of course, attempting to set up a local network here in the Greater Toronto area as well. So again, in the chat, you'll find a number of different links, again, to all of these various networks that we have created and are supporting through the UnityNet VTA organization and UnityNet International, where we're also attempting to support the UnityNet Africa and Diaspora to organize around the events and organize around the community engagement activities so they can fully create these INAP collaboratives, which again, here is an example that I've used in the past for UnityNet International, focused on what we call values-driven digital and community transformation. So we do the two main things within our network. We focus on creating community partnerships for the ultimate purpose of facilitating the creation of these community-based cooperative humanitarian enterprise teams, consisting of the young people and family in local communities worldwide who are seeking to implement these local regenerative solutions for achieving the global goals. And second, of course, we are helping to facilitate the local establishment of regenerative community unity garden learning hubs, the spaces in all of our local communities we call community unity gardens. These spaces are places for educating and training young people and families in all of these local communities of our network to become localized, regenerative, climate smart, humanitarian food producer entrepreneurs who will be delivering local solutions for food and climate and peace and social justice, including the latest in controlled environment regenerative production solutions that can be integrated into any type of communities, whether urban, suburban, or rural, along with leveraging a number of different digitally integrated social and business tools that facilitate both collaboration with local communities as well as the global network, along with facilitating local income generation for the local community members of our network so they can become more resilient, begin to adapt to the changing global climate that will also be affecting their own local watersheds, and the ability for them to produce abundance from their own local productive resources, including from healthy soils, clean water, and renewable energy. So I'd like to get into the nitty-gritty a little bit. We are planning to do in each local community is establish these global Unity Network INAP collaboratives. So this is a City of Markham example. It's an overview of the structure of our network of networks as we build each local UnityNet node in our network. We want to build this partnership model so we can have the different sectors. There are 7 originally, now 8 of the local partners coming together to create the international exchanges led by the schools, the universities, colleges, school boards, etc., working as a partnership between the educators, but not exclusively. So the types of exchanges we would like to do include, for instance, healthcare practitioners, emergency managers like paramedics, fire, security, police, and all of the public sector governance, the local governments, and various others as necessary as per local considerations and needs. So the partners of the other sectors like business, interfaith, civil society, finance, orange economy, both within the settler and the indigenous communities worldwide, come together for the local development pathways, institutions from each local community, collaborating to empower those local entrepreneurs. So we call this again the Interfaith Neighborhood Academic and Business Collaborative. It's based on this HEPTA matrix partnership model, originally developed with Drawdown Markham, where the local network comes together as a co-op and a member of the Global Partnership for Regenerative Development. They're there to empower the local humanitarian entrepreneurs who are delivering these local solutions for achieving the localized, productive, compassionate, collaborative, regenerative economy that leaves no one behind. So this is the example of a HEPTA matrix partnership that could be created in the City of Markham here in York Region, Greater Toronto. So these are all existing entities in our communities. So these partners include, for instance, the City of Markham as the governance partner, the Markham Board of Trade as the business partner, the York Region District and Catholic School Boards, York University, Seneca College, which both have campuses here in the City of Markham, as key academic partners of the INAB Collaborative, the Markham Interchurch Committee for Affordable Housing, and as an example of interfaith partner in Markham, Rotary Club of Markham Sunrise as another example. There is Rotary Club of Markham Unionville as well as the Lions Club, the YMCA, Scouts Canada, Air Cadet Service of Canada, various civil society partners. We hope to also engage with the finance organizations like PACE and Meridian Credit Unions, as well as the big five banks, which all have major offices in Markham, to become the finance partners of the INAB Collaborative. So joining the UnityNet finance network, beginning to deploy the regenerative financing systems throughout the network in our communities that have established their own local INAB Collaborative cooperatives. Which I just need to emphasize, this is the primary way of financing what would flow down to the local community. So the organizations, as well as the infrastructure that we're establishing, the cooperative enterprises who are implementing the regenerative infrastructure and executing the community engagement events and interventions. So this is where we can hopefully bypass the UN system of finance, which is very much top down, where the UN and like World Bank and others are basically financing national governments and sending that finance down through that structure they have created, where we can now finance directly with the community partners through the INAB Collaborative. So the Markham Arts Council, as an example of the Orange Economy partner of this Heptamatrix partnership model, we are hoping to have a conversation with them in the near future, hopefully by this spring or summer, so we can really engage with them. Especially we'll move forward with some of our local council members in those discussions. So this is not the end of it. We could have at least as many partners from the local Indigenous communities, since the Two-Row Wampum has described the two societies working and living in parallel. So we have the same 5 or 6 nations we state in our land acknowledgement, may include representation from, for instance, the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Wendat, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples, where the partnership with Indigenous peoples is represented on this page by the heart in the center of the partnership matrix. So this is the critical 8th partner of the INAB collaboratives. There are stewards of Mother Earth that are critical to the future of human survival for at least the next 7 generations into the future. So again, in the chat, you'll find a few links, some of our local organizations that you'll see on the screen there, just in case you might want to connect with any one of them. But of course, you should be looking at your own local communities, similar kinds of networks. So we bring all these partners together during the tree planting and flag raising ceremonies, the other local community ceremonies and activities, including formally commemorating and celebrating the establishment of the Youth Peace Gardens on any one of the dates that have been planned in our UnityNet Living Room calendar. We'll also ask that all of the organizations, institutions that have been invited to these events participate and form and join a local INAB collaborative cooperative business organization. So the mandate of the INAB collaborative is simple. Do your best to empower any and all local female and feminist humanitarian entrepreneurs to ensure they succeed in their local cooperative enterprises, starting with the establishment of a local community Unity Garden Learning Center, or a community hub, as we call it, which will deliver the various goods and services, including local regenerative and climate smart foods, that will ensure that we can implement solutions and achieve the global goals locally, starting with the SDGs, in ways that leave no one behind. So what's shown on the screen here is just an example of the INAB Collaborative Cooperative Empowerment Network for what is known as the City of Markham here in York Region, Greater Toronto Area, in the Great Lakes watershed north of Lake Ontario, Canada. But here we actually have 25 municipalities in the Greater Toronto Area. Each one can have an INAB Collaborative. Right now we have a placeholder for Markham and Mississauga, where I would like to aim to have at least 5 INAB Collaboratives in the GTA by the end of 2023, as shown on this page, with the others most likely established in the cities of Vaughan and Richmond Hill, City of Toronto, which may actually have many local INAB Collaboratives, possibly coinciding with the 4 major watersheds of the city, including Humber River watershed in the west, along with Mimico and Etobicoke Creek, the Don River watershed in the heart of Toronto, the Highland and Rouge River watersheds in the east, along with parts of Petticoat Creek watershed, and along with the 25 or more municipalities. We thus have at least 20 more possible INAB collaboratives that can be created in the GTA. So my hope and wish is that every one of the 9 municipalities of the region of York, starting with Markham, Vaughan, and Richmond Hill, as I noted, but also Newmarket, Aurora, East Gwillimbury, Georgina, King, and Witcher Stouffville will also have an INAB collaborative in time for some of our events this year. So again, you'll find some information about the Greater Toronto Area, which we are now referring as well to be part of the Greater Toronto bioregion. I do want to again mention the importance of INAB collaboratives. This is an effort through UnityNet from the private sector among humanitarian entrepreneurs. It's not intended to become a program of the UN. The climate movement has mostly failed because sectors like the oil industry basically have a stranglehold over finance, and it's the real obstacle to climate action. Because far too often these programs get captured by oil industry interests as well. So look at the last COP27 meeting in Egypt. This was captured by corporations like Coca-Cola, where there were more fossil fuel industry lobbyists than anyone else at that meeting. And you can actually find a reference to a Guardian article that was published right after that meeting in the chat, where they say there were more than 600 fossil fuel lobbyists at the COP27 climate conference, a rise of more than 25% from last year, and outnumbering any one frontline community affected by the climate crisis. So to have any hope to save the world from climate chaos, we must first get oil companies out of politics, but then we must phase out their product once and for all. Of course, that is not our job in UnityNet. There are plenty of other action groups that are on top of that agenda. They could also become our allies. So top-down government action has obviously failed to do anything significant in terms of climate action for the past 3 decades or more, especially in terms of resilience and adaptation to what is coming. So the government and corporate focus, of course, is on mitigation and reduction of the root cause and source of the problem, burning of fossil fuels, where they're trying to convince the money class, these investors, to stop investing in fossil fuel production. But that is mostly failing because the revolving door of fossil fuel interests in politics. So we're simply allied with people who are attempting to build a parallel financing system, probably on blockchain, one that is hopefully outside of the reach of fossil fuel interests. So this REFI, as we call it, which is seeking to reimagine finance to one that is based on nature and natural capital and human capital as the foundation. So I'm not an expert, but I just try to understand what it is that they're trying to do. Companies like Carbon Shot Earth are spearheading these efforts internally within UnityNet. So our Unity network of networks seeks to empower people in our local communities to eventually become self-sufficient, both financially and otherwise in terms of management and the structures. So this is why we focus on productive systems, focusing in particular on the production of regenerative climate smart food as a revenue source, because we believe that alone will allow our network members to become self-sufficient in a number of ways, so that those entities like the UN Global Compact members and the governments, as represented by the UN, will not need to constantly prop up or subsidize the states and regions that are failing because of climate change or otherwise. So I do believe that we collectively, us human beings, will very likely not be able to achieve those 2-degree pledges, and certainly not the 1.5-degree pledges that was committed by the Paris Agreement signatories. We're already past, in terms of climate tipping points, the 1.5-degree threshold, according to many scientists. So I believe that we are headed toward 3 to 4 degrees or more this century, which is again backed up by some articles, again, you can see in the chat. So the fourth function of our UnityNet community hub model is actually the key to making this happen. So we also want to engage, as I've mentioned in previous presentations, again with Regional Councillor Jim Jones and his vision for the 407 Transitway. So it's not just about the vertical farms, but also about what you see in the chat with regards to what Jim is trying to put together. He's putting together a Canadian Sports Institute Ontario organization to put Markham at the forefront of Canadian sports. So he wants to create a unique high-performance training environment, combining the programming and sports technology. So within that center, athletes, coaches, officials, and young athletes can have access to high-quality experts, service, and support. We see the building in the photo on Jim's website, and we want to establish that building as a UnityNet community unity hub, possibly a building that is potentially a solar roof city pod building. So it is a model that could be replicated in cities and communities across Canada, but also worldwide, and could be equally tailored and re-engineered by local young people with proper training in architecture and living building design theory, and practicum experience in real-world structural design and regenerative growing systems for local communities and local cultures globally. But first, we need to engage. We need to get the young people excited about their own better future, get them involved in redesigning that future for their own benefit and for their own thriving cultures. But we need to have them engaged in these conversations. So again, you'll find in the chat a little bit more about the Solar Roof City Pod, not specific information, but with regards to open source architecture for eco-cities of the future, and the fact that this solution has been put into Creative Commons, and you will find a link to the Creative Commons license placement, as well as our community Unity Hub network, where you can see number 4 of the 4 main functions is community arts and culture expression exchange centers. You'll find as well, again, additional links to the professionals network and the public networks for those same networks as well. And so there's an article, one more article, just for people to get a little bit of background regarding the pathway we're on with regard to climate change. I don't want to bring anybody down, but I think it is important that we embrace what is actually happening in our communities. So only if I have time today, I'll give everybody a little bit of the history and move on with this presentation. I'll show the screen for now. I'm not going to go forward. I think I can probably open it up for people to have a discussion about what has been presented today. I think it's a little bit of a different perspective on what we're doing, because it is more than just the vertical farms. It is about the culture and the engagement of these communities, and especially our young people in these conversations, and getting them up to speed on how to design their own better future. So, is there anybody that may wish to say a few words on today's presentation? Mitch, I know you always have something usually to say on what has been presented.
Well, I'm challenged by some of the stuff that I see, and I made notes on the side there talking about how we're doing it down here in Mexico. And I don't know which is the right way or the wrong way, to be honest. But I'm sort of, not sort of, I've encouraged in the Maya community to take the lead, because they have the knowledge and information that is, I guess, something, if we look closely at where the knowledge base of humanity is today, they are still in the backwater with their living styles, but their spiritual acuity, I don't know if we've ever heard that term, their spiritual acuity about the future requires us to allow them to take the lead. And that's why I put a note in here about the Haudenosaunee community, because I noticed that they were having a fight with Osgood Hall about some trees that Osgood Hall wanted to cut down on their property. And I sent them a note just saying, tell the Law Society that they don't own their land, that they never completed the deal. The Law Society, I don't know if you know this, but the Law Society took control of all the funds from all the treaties that the indigenous people, the ones that you pay homage to at the beginning of your presentation, but those contracts were all held by the Law Society, and they still owe the people the money that was paid to them, that was owed to them. So I just wrote and I'm sure the Haudenosaunee community isn't even up to date on what is owed to them, because the Law Society never told them that they held all their funds. And frankly, it can't be tracked. The people in control of the Canadian governments, I say governments, right now, we're watching the province push aside all the progress that the Indigenous people have made at City Hall in Toronto, and they have made considerable progress, but it's all being pushed under the table, and that's because the Haudenosaunee haven't figured out where they are in the system of Canada. And the difference is here in Mexico, and I trust this is a fair analogy, is that the old Mexican towns, the old Maya towns, were asked to organize themselves. The government said, put a commission together, and that's what we're doing. I met with one of the leaders from Tulum. We did a ceremony down at his place in Los Ojos. And now I've come back to Playa, and I'm asking the Human Rights Commission to organize a day when we can bring all the different communities together. So what we're doing is similar to what you're doing, except you're designing it around the SDGs, which is, in my mind, a faulty design. And I also mentioned, why are you not using that design instead of your 7 or 8 sector model? This is a 12 sector model that was developed by Barbara Marx Hubbard. And she was a leader in the humanity movement. And I don't know why we look to a new design like this. It's a nice design. I mean, it has the heart in the center, so it's got my attention. But it's just not what this is. This is an important thing by one of the leading women in the transformative movement. And why would we take a new format and attach it to another new format, which is the SDGs, which is defunct in thinking? Certainly it has a budget behind it, and that's a good thing, but we don't know how to get the budget from the SDGs. We have no idea. And I don't know. And I don't even know if the UNFCCC knows how to get money from it. I don't know that. And if you're going to get any money from the UNFCCC, or if you're even thinking about it,
No,
I'm sorry?
I said, no, we're not, because we're in Canada. We're in Markham,
No,
and
but
we're
the
not going to get money from the UNFCCC.
But why not? But why not?
If I may, hello, this is Andrew. Can you see me okay?
I can see you. You're looking good today.
Hi, thanks, Mitch. In answer to your question, or to address it more directly, I've heard Lloyd make this statement earlier, but I believe that there is a way to contact and connect the members of the United Nations Global Compact, but not them directly as members. There's something called the CFO Task Force. And if you go there, you'll find there's 72 members that are responsible for, I think, $5 trillion worth of monies that are being spent directed towards ESG and specifically for the SDGs. So I'm putting together a mailing list of those people, Mitch, to reach those CFOs directly. It's they who control the decision-making on the part of the organizations themselves. So from a practical standpoint, it's not necessarily the Global Compact as an organization, but in my opinion, it's the CFOs that have formed together who claim to focus on these outcomes. So that's my 2 cents.
What is the name of that group? CFO?
Task Force.
I put it into the chat, what Andrew has just said. So if you save the chat, you'll have that information. I will also be looking up that information as well for myself.
I'll
I'll
go look at that. But I want to interject. The UNGC, having had experience with it over the years, is an organization. Here, you know how I'm the UN resident coordinator for Canada, interim. You know that.
De facto.
We're trying to get him fired.
Well, the UNGC is worse than what I have done. Because everyone thinks that they're a UN agency. They are not. They are just a spin-off organization that got some money to get together, and they go out representing an initiative like yours. They're less than Global Unity Network, because at least you're walking your talk. They don't walk their talk. I know this. I've walked with them. I participated when they came into the ISO 26000, when we developed the ISO 26000. And I don't see that anywhere. Those standards are world standards. The ISO group is a huge database of information I mean, it's amazing. I get amazed every time I look at the ISO group information that they already have standards for graphene. Believe it or not, you know. And I also don't see anything in here about graphene. No, we need to talk about graphene and get graphene. I'm pushing it in Mexico. I'm going to the president with a proposal to get set up graphene industries in cement, paint, and steel in Mexico.
So let's take a step backwards to unpack this, Rich. I agree with you that the United Nations Global Compact is not an agency of the United Nations. It was set up by Kofi Annan in
2000. Yeah, in 2000.
Yes, but at any rate,
I was there when he did it.
They were never intended to be anything other than, as I understand it, a corporate social responsibility organization. But my point is that those people that have registered with them and publicly publish what their goals and objectives are, to me, they are putting themselves on the line to deliver these things, and they're not delivering. But we are delivering. So my contention is that, Mitch, we need to contact the ones that have the power of the pen, which is, in my opinion, the chief financial officers. They are the ones that are spending the monies. So my intent is for us to align ourselves with that to deliver what we're doing from the grassroots up. That's been my ultimate objective.
Well, I think that's a sensible approach, and I'd be interested in knowing what progress you made. I'm going to do it separately, attempting to go through the UN resident coordinator in the countries that those CFOs are from. So like when I contact that organization, I'm going to ask them to contact the UN resident coordinator in the country that they are the CFO of, because the UN itself is a broken organization. We all know that.
Agreed.
And how do we now, when it's broken, its member states are broken, this is a good thing for us because it gives us an opportunity to get in between their stupidity and the future.
I agree. I agree 100%, Mitch.
So, Mitch, I'd like to mention as well, there is an ongoing conversation. You may wish to be involved in that as well, with a gentleman out in British Columbia. He's with an organization, the IITTI. And so we're trying to get him in front of all of these members of the UN Global Compact, those CFOs, especially those that are members of the organization that the 72 members of the CFO task force of the UNGC. If we can identify where they are, what cities they're in, we actually want to try to get face to face with them. But we're gonna leverage a certain network that we're gonna work with, this IITTI, so we can put together a way to be able to engage with them in these conversations. So those CFOs are aware of who we are, what we're doing, and how we can accomplish things together to achieve their goals and our goals at the same time.
I do want to say that you put your finger on it. The UN coordinator for each country, to me personally, is in fact the team that is supposed to take responsibility for it. If we're doing their work, it's okay. Let them get credit for it, but let us get the outcome that we need for the people at the bottom. That's all I'm suggesting.
Well, Andrew, this is the first time we've been in such large agreement, and it's good.
That's where I like to start.
Yeah,
this is why we need these conversations, so we can converge on something that we can all agree upon.
But it's what we've really agreed upon is the fact that the UN is incompetent. So
but Mitch, my point is this: all international and even national organizations are incompetent by default. They're supposed to be, because they're looking after their own interests As unfortunately, the United States has identified corporations as people, but they don't have a soul. So it's up to us, I believe, to be the ones to get it done for the people. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, so I'm going to put a word in here. Working with a UN agency as I do, Mitchell's absolutely right. Large sections have been pulled away by corporate interests and foreign interests, and of course, the rule of gold. There are also certain segments who are very diligently working all the time. Of course, I sit here as testament to that. We're putting in quite a lot of time getting groups organized in the African interior to reform their internal structures with regard to nonprofit organizations so that they can join that network of networks and get that cross-referencing and ability from those groups who actually give enough of a damn to reach out and get that job done. And that's what we're here for. We all represent groups where certain aspects are broken, and they're broken by design, because the only way you can get through that maze is to already get in the door and have an idea as to how that system works. If you jump in and try to rummage your way around, you're the equivalent of a rat in a maze. You're bumping your head against walls until you know what the old standards of policy and procedure are. So those of us who worked inside of these systems, we know where the holes are, and we avoid them like the plague. But we also know where many of the dead ends lie. But under current situations, places that were straight roads also become dead ends. We've learned how to be able to move inside of this maze to the point where, hey, if that road works, I'm going to reach out to another group outside and see if they've got a better view. That is our job. We create those partnerships. And without those partnerships, well, might as well not call it the UN, might as well call it the International Corporation of Gas and Oil.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Lisa Nees. And I do want to give you certainly props and appreciation, because identifying the way the system works is the first way to work within the system that exists. But as these corporations now, you'll find, Mitch, there's a lot of pushback in general here in the United States in particular against what's called ESG, in particular because it seems that there is a focus now on making sure that, of course, corporate profits are maximized to the benefit of the shareholders, but not the stakeholders. There's been a lot of pushback against the Davos World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab for bringing forward this conversation. But at the end of the day, Lisa Anise, it's only quantifiable outcomes that's going to make a difference. And that's how I think it's so important what you're doing, to make sure that what we actually accomplish is quantified and is integrated with the metrics that are being identified by these corporations. The more we can align ourselves with demonstrating we're accomplishing the outcomes, I think the better able we'll be to attract the funding that's already out there available for us.
Well, and there's a good part of it that's actually out there that we simply haven't connected with because of the groups that we've been associating with previously and trying to work within full bore, which of course has been an abject failure. That's why you keep seeing a whole bunch of people here with letters behind their names and titles and honoraria behind all of that, because we've worked all of those avenues, each and every one. So moving forward on something like this, yes, what I'm doing is we're following a certain pattern, but that pattern changes because of where we are starting.
Sure.
A lot of the management of this entire program is going to actually come from within through the people that we're actually reaching out to that are working there on the ground.
Agreed.
Well, Lisa, do you have the attention of any UN resident coordinator from Africa where you're working?
Absolutely not. My contacts have to do with arts and cultural interests. And of course, I'm dealing with a number of different government departments in each nation that I'm working with. For example, in Kenya, we've got an education forum that wants to set up an actual structure for accessing the educational system, regardless of whether or not you have money, something more in keeping with the Sister Schools project. On the other hand, we're also dealing with preservation groups, which a lot of national organizations tend to take for granted because they believe, oh, well, now we're going to have culture no matter where we go. They think that that is going to exist. But as soon as you start tearing people apart in terms of massive amounts of movement, migrants, refugees, and the like, which is going to increase under the global warming models that we've come up with, you're going to see a disruption of culture everywhere. And without culture, man by nature stops being connected to other men. We have depression and anxiety that resolve, and the end result is all of these social ills we are witnessing right now.
Well, Mitch, if I could, she didn't answer your, well, she did answer your question,
No,
but the point, I think, Mitch, is that I'm willing to undertake an effort with you to identify and pull together a database of these resident coordinators on the continent of Africa and worldwide, for that matter. They're only 55. It's not like it's a whole lot, but the whole idea is to connect the conversation we're having at the top with the conversation that Lisa Anise is having at the bottom and connect those dots, Mitch. So I'd be willing to undertake that effort.
Well, just to help you out with that, there is a UN resident coordinator agency of the UN. I just have not had much luck in communicating with them, but there is one, and they they have a program for training UNRCs, and it was recently changed, actually, about 4 years ago, after I first started making some noise. I started making this noise about 7 years ago, plus or minus. And they did change them, but they, you probably heard the metaphor, rearranged the chairs on the Titanic as it went down. That's what they did. They didn't really change anything with the donor countries. The donor countries, which has all the money, where your CFOs are going to be from, they'll all be in that. But the CFOs are, because they went and joined the UNGC, that we're cut off at the knees with that. So if we,
that's further reason for building up from the ground, Mitch, which is exactly what we're doing.
Well, Mitch, let me also say again that the UNGC is just a volunteer organization. So whether someone joins or not really has nothing to do with what they actually do in their corporation. But the point is that the organization itself has gained prominence within the United Nations. They have a particular objective from 2021 to 2023, which actually launched this platform we're on now. But here's the funny thing about it, Mitch. They're trying to, let's say in Africa, they have an intent to register the 10 largest companies in each of those 55 African countries with the United Nations Global Compact. However, in Canada, for instance, there are less than 1,000 members of the United Nations Global Compact, as is in the United States, where the majority of the CFOs are. So I really believe that we can, again, connect the dots. Even in Mexico, you'll find, if you go to the United Nations Global Compact website, you'll find a list of the members in each country, and you'll find this a relatively minuscule number, but the organization itself has got an increased importance because it's now the CEO, her name is Sanda Ochiamba from Kenya. I think it's important, Lisa Anise, we understand that the United Nations Habitat, UN Habitat, and the United Nations Development Corporate Development Group, they're both headquartered in Nairobi, Kenya. So the more we can do to, I think, again, demonstrate how what we're doing has an impact on a global scale, the better we are. And it's in particular not the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, I think, Mitch, that are only voluntary commitments, but the UN Habitat's New Urban Agenda. Every 20 years, the UN Habitat comes up with what they call the New Urban Agenda for 20 years. Right now, we're in the 2016 to 2036 phase. But for us in the United States, Mitch, it's the Department of Housing and Urban Development that is our country representative to the UN Habitat. So Lisa needs to the degree that we can demonstrate what we're doing has an impact at that level. Then we can talk about USAID projects. We can talk about other government fundings and international fundings that your local grassroots people are qualified to participate with, Lisa needs. It's
Oh,
not
yeah.
easy work, but it's necessary work.
Well, no, that's,
I
the
think we're in
grassroots.
agreement there.
Well, on the grassroots organizations, yes, they have to be sold on the issue one at a time, which is essentially the same type of work that we're doing in the interior, selling them one at a time. And of course, those numbers are increasing. Now that we're in the phase where we're starting to put together the first association partnerships, even though I'm looking at about 40 to 45% of attrition of the original intake groups, those that are still there are going to be multiplying their numbers by anywhere from 3 to 12. So
that's one reason I'm providing you and the hip hop community with the same platform that Lloyd has been taking advantage of for these past 90 weeks. At least you get one place where you can begin to collaborate with all this. Mitch, there's a chat message from Michael Cole that you might want to reply to. It deals with graphene in Mexico, but I do want to.
I can talk to that because I think it's important that we all understand a little bit about graphene. And Michael, I'll do the best I can. Graphene is a new product material that is the lightest material and the strongest material in the world. It is 1 molecule thick, and it's a recently discovered material. Maybe it's around 20 years old now, and it's come into prominence in the most recently as they develop new patented processes for using it. And they're using it right now in paints, in cement, in steel, for the 3 big ones. And why do I think it's important for Mexico? Because I think that those 3 industries, as Mexico is going to go through this huge development now, much more so than Canada. Canada, they're going to grow to their plan of the Century Initiative is to grow to 100 million people by the end of the century. And they haven't even thought about graphene. So here in Mexico, we're going to be using graphene in all the new developments and all the new painting. Like when you use paint down here in these salty air, paints and they last like 3 to 5 years. With adding graphene oxide into the paint mix cycle, and I'm only speaking about what I know. I haven't done it myself. I know it from reading information. It moves it from a 5 to a 10-year cycle where it will last. And steel will be stronger and last longer. And cement will be stronger and last longer. For architects, I don't know if you ever heard of Buckminster Fuller, but Buckminster Fuller used to design buildings that they couldn't build because the tensile strength of steel wasn't sufficient. If Buckminster Fuller were alive today, he would be so excited about graphene that my excitement would pale in comparison.
Mhm.
And if I can get Mexico to go on it like big time, we can service all of South America and all the islands. And imagine just the kind of growth that's going to be. Imagine Mexico, like if Canada is going to grow from 36 million to 100 million, imagine if we grow Mexico just from 130 million to 200 million or 200, like all you Canadians that are suffering in the cold are going to want to come down to Mexico.
Well, let me ask you,
I'm
Mitch,
sure.
are you working with the Mexico United Nations coordinator?
They don't return my calls. They don't return me. I've attempted to go to the UN resident coordinator through the president, because I have friends that know the president. And the UN resident coordinator answers to the president, but so far nada. 2 days ago, I was in a meeting, a Maya ceremony, and I met this guy, Arturo Castro, he's running for mayor of Playa del Carmen. I mentioned what I'm doing with graphene and what I want to do, and he's interested. He's from Foreign Affairs, and he understands what I want to do, and we're going to have a meeting and see what next steps we might be taking. But I'm very buoyed by my interactions with the Maya here, because I'm on the Human Rights Commission here, which is more than I ever achieved in Canada. I'm only the interim UN resident coordinator in Canada, and Lloyd and I know how well that has served me.
Well, let me ask you, Mitch, if you could put into the chat the organization that you're working through or from or representing. I'd appreciate that. But as we've now got about 15 minutes left, I do see new people coming in. So I would like Lloyd to ask if you could introduce or allow our new guests to introduce themselves before we wrap up. Lloyd, balls over to you.
All right, so thank you very much. This was a good, very dynamic conversation today. I just wanted to mention that, yes, we are moving forward and trying to engage with UNGC members. As I mentioned before, ITTI is one avenue, but really what we want is those young people to be the ones to really engage with them. So it's not us older folks that are asking the tough questions of their future. It's because it's not our future, it's theirs.
Well, we have to teach them how to ask questions.
Exactly. Yeah. So PO is a very key term to be able to teach our youth as well. So we're gonna continue to work on that engagement with the schools to get them to get our teachers using those terms.
Again, you have people here, Godfrey Tambo and Samson, that have joined us. At least acknowledge our guests before we end, please.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Andrew.
Let's hear from Samson and Godfrey. Sure.
Or Godfrey, you've unmuted yourself.
Yes, I've unmuted myself, Lloyd. Thank you all, and greetings to you all the way from Malaysia. This is Godfrey Tambo Ayong, originally from Cameroon, but residing in Malaysia. I'm a member of UNET. I joined UNET some like almost 3 or 4 weeks ago, and this is my very first meeting, so I'm trying to learn more from all of you, and to see areas that we can engage. I'm a business consultant. I consult for Simba Maas Consultant. It's a US-based consultancy. I'm also a Pan-African and former co-founder of the African Union Youth Wing. I'm also the Assistant Secretary General for Global Africa Economic Development Association. This is a new Pan-African organization also, we're still building. And I'm also the Vice Chair of Congress of African People, CAP. So basically that's who I am. Thank you all.
Well, please put your information in the chat. We like to follow up with you, and I'll put mine in the chat as well. I like specifically for you to follow up with me. I'm Andrew Williams Jr. Many of them you may or may not know that I do provide support services for this particular group. You mentioned UNAD. Normally they've been meeting on Mondays. They haven't met recently, but that group grew out of this group that you're with now. So we do welcome you. You can also, if you choose, schedule time to make a presentation about your organization and your interests, and Lloyd will accommodate you, I think, if you give him enough time. And we will also be able to pre-record information for our presentations going forward. So thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Prince Andrew. I've sent you an invite on Facebook. I think that was like almost a week ago. So I think we'll connect there as well. Godfred Tambo.
Okay, well, I've got about 3 dozen invites. I haven't yet
Even
addressed
on
them, but
LinkedIn as well.
I'll connect with you directly. I'll put my contact information in the chat. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
And Gottfried, I sent you my WhatsApp information as well. I've been the key into this system, and I would love to explain to you how we're actually building this program from the ground up. I do have some contacts in Malaysia and Bangladesh, and I would very much like to discuss that with you as well. So you'll find that in my information in the chat.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. And dynamically, we would like to be able to establish UnityNet Malaysia. It has not been established, so that's something we can also potentially work with you on doing. As well, Samson, would you like to say a few words about yourself as well and what you've been doing recently? Are you able to unmute?
Hello, am I audible enough?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I am Samson Oloch from Kenya, a member of UnityNet Africa, and also one of the board members of UNAT. Also one of the co-founders of UnityNet Africa. In fact, to introduce myself clearly, I was the first interim chairperson when the UNAT was being formed for some time. When now we were doing a new election for the board, I stepped down for our General Secretary, who is Madam Jane, who also comes from Kenya. So I appreciate the meeting, though I am late. I rushed for an emergency somewhere. That is why I came late. I'm sorry for that. But what I want to say is that I'm the Executive Director of Bridges of Hope Foundation that is focusing in regenerative agriculture, youth activities, and women empowerment. We are also working on with sports. We are developing talents for young people. In terms of sports, we are trusting God to build a football academy that is going to ensure that Africa emerge in talents for the better of our youth. We are also doing a program on commercial sex workers rehabilitation centers, whereby we build them community vocational training centers where they can come in and take some courses so that they leave the commercial sex working and they engage themselves in activities that will allow them to make money.
Oh, we seem to have lost Samson.
Sorry, somebody was calling me. I'm sorry for that. So that is what particularly we are doing. We are also working together to ensure that the disabilities in Africa and also globally at large are well taken care of. Right now, we are ensuring that those who are disabled can also emerge to take some key positions in the government in Africa. I'm also a member of World Bank in the area of World Fund for Development and Planning. We are doing typically monitoring and evaluation for the World Bank funding that they are giving to the community, to the local community organizations, and especially those who are partnering, work together in the area of agriculture and also business, where we form circles with the community organizations and self-help groups. So those are the things that I am doing. I'm partnering with so many organizations in Africa to ensure that the program is well taken care of. Therefore, I am very grateful, Lloyd. I'm very grateful, Andrew, and everybody on board. Let's just take this mantle together and work together to ensure that our communities are well placed in the society, so that those who are in the community are able to get in touch with, and also they can do programs that can better their lives. Thank you so much, and God bless you. I welcome all of us to Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Botswana, and everyone in Namibia, where we are doing our programs. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Samson. So it's good to have you back with us as well on these calls. I'd like to ask if Doris might be able to introduce herself as well. Did you want to say a few things, Mitch? Yes.
I just wanted to ask Godfrey and Samson, both of them, if they have any contacts with the UN resident coordinator in the countries that they've mentioned.
It seems unlikely, Mitch, because we haven't been directly promoting that as something that they should be doing. So that is something we should move forward with as we move to the next phase. Let's make sure that all of our members are, especially the leaders in each chapter we have, are saying, here's the top task to do is connect with your UN resident coordinator, find out who they are, where they are, and how to get in contact with them.
And maybe we could also add, based on what we learned today from Matthew, from Andrew, is the CFO initiative of the UN Global Compact. Because
well, this is something we are supposed to do here in the West. So in places like Toronto and Vancouver and Calgary, where we have our networks here in Canada, but also in the US, also in Europe. And actually, Lisa Anise is key to Europe because she is one of the co-founders of the UnityNet Europe node of our network.
Yes, but she hasn't contacted the resident coordinators.
No, what we need to do is get somebody into that network who can take that task of going to every one of the 72 that are in Europe, in those corporations in Europe. And we can do the same thing here in Canada and the US, in the G20 countries.
Well, before we get distracted,
maybe just to interrupt a little bit, sorry, Lloyd. Thank you.
Before we get distracted, if Doris or anyone else that has not introduced themselves before we close, now is that time.
Heinrich, did you have a few words to say? I know you've been on the line with us.
Yep, good evening everybody here from South Africa, van der Belpark. My name is Henry van der Merwe. I'm in agricultural and industrial engineering. I think we've touched several very important issues tonight, but I think the most important thing is to identify those programs that already have momentum, but needs to be tweaked to deliver a better solution. And I think the suggestions made by Andrew comes down to that you know, instead of trying to redo everything, let's hook up on those programs where there's already momentum and see how we can use that to our advantage. The other very important aspect for us to be successful is to use our limited resources and effort in the best way that we can influence the outcome of the projects in a way that we want to achieve that. We've identified in the past that we want to identify catalytic projects that will have the nature of taking the young people and the old people with us, focusing on the livability issues, and make sure that you know, in the spirit of UnityNet, that we don't leave anybody behind, with the recognition of the people that have worked in these areas long before us. The reality is, in the past 20 years, a lot of countries in the world have actually deteriorated. And you know, there might be modern communication, there might be all these wonderful things happening, but as Lisa have pointed out today, if the cultural, the culture, the cement that keep these societies together is suddenly in jeopardy, you know, we are not achieving what we want to achieve. So in that framework that we've discussed the events of tonight, I think it's important that we identify those small but chewable bits that is going to make the biggest difference in our endeavor to make a change. Sometimes, you know, taking on too much at once cause us to fail in the because the foundation that we need is not proper, and so we need a total systems approach where we consider all these issues that goes with it before we embark on the next step. Thank you.
But what my thoughts are, just like we're going to finish up in about 2 minutes, but my thoughts are on this, what you've said is this concept we have of twinning communities. So what we're doing here in Ontario, in Toronto, in Markham, in York Region, is focusing on basically one big education project or two, and one infrastructure project as a demonstration. And working with those organizations that are already moving in parallel and doing similar things with us. So what I think you need to be doing in South Africa, for instance, or anywhere else where everybody is in their world, is identify those local projects and let's see if we can twin those communities. Because the idea here is that we want to create a network of projects around the world that can be collectively funded. This is why if we can get my dream would be to have the Federation of Canadian Municipalities take on our community Unity Garden Learning Center structures and say, we want one of these in all 444 municipalities of Ontario or all 2,600 municipalities of Canada. We're going to scale this out by building multiples of these, not just a one-off. We're going to build hundreds or even thousands of them. And every one of them is going to be twinned with another one in Africa and Asia and anywhere else in the world. So we end up with perhaps 5,000, 10,000 of these things being built. Now a funder can come along and say, okay, I can plop down $100 million. This makes sense to me from the major funding World Bank perspective. They're not going to care about the one-offs in a small community. But if it's scaled through replication, that will catch their interest.
Is there anyone else that would like to introduce themselves before we close?
I just have a quick comment relative to what Hendrik was saying. I would just like to add the comment, and that is why we need the UN resident coordinator, because that person will find out what's happening in that country so we don't duplicate efforts.
Or not. Or not. So is there anyone else that hasn't introduced themselves that would like to before we close?
Oh, yes.
Oh, Doris.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm called Doris Kamagara from Uganda. I'm a member of UnityNet, African Diaspora, Uganda chapter. I have been part of this program for some time, and I've been attending these meetings. We really appreciate the discussions are really giving us knowledge and widening our knowledge, widening our skills, and we are learning a lot. I appreciate. What we do What I do, I'm a founder, Bagashi Foundation. We basically work with children. The foundation was started after realizing a high number of children dropping out of schools. So majorly the activities are to mitigate the risk of dropouts and also working with those who have already dropped out. For the dropouts, we do catering and baking trainings, tailoring and knitting. And then children also engaged in edutainment, computer skills, and then also guardians and parents of the children, especially those who are vulnerable and maybe they have no capacity to look after their children. We engage them also in economic activities that generate funds. Among others, we also do financial inclusion, such as the literacy campaigns, whereby the parents and guardians are taught on how to handle finances. From this, we have realized a number of groups, especially women, are forming up and creating cash rounds, and also groups to borrow from microfinance institutions, basically through group lending methodology, because most of them have no assets to offer to big banks for securing. So usually we train them on how they can make group guarantees to access non-secured loans through microfinance institutions. So basically on financial inclusion, that is what we are doing with parents and guardians to empower them and ensure that they can look after their children.
So thank you very much for that introduction, Doris.
Yeah, basically.
So I guess at this point in time, we've heard from everybody, I believe, on the call at one point or another in this discussion today, the week 90 of the Indigenous Global Unity Summit event. And so thank you all for coming to the IGU Summit. We will see you next week. Hopefully we will have a guest speaker as we were hoping to have today. And we will be moving this network forward as always, preparing our people for this coming Sustainable Development Goals period of action.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lloyd.
Thanks,
And thank
Lloyd.
everyone for attending. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you,